You know what's interesting is Satan took so much away from him, but he figured the worst thing he could do was leave his wife.
Well, her only advice to him was curse God and die. Curse God and die.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Pastor's Hangover. That's right. That is our new podcast, and I'm so excited. Joined by some pastors, Hal Mayer this morning, Daryl Black, and Craig Altman.
Yes, big hangover this morning for sure.
We definitely had some questions about the name last week.
Yeah, I don't know why, but it's a good name. Gets people's attention.
There's a reason.
There's a reason.
Craig is like, well, I don't know. I wasn't part
tell
of
me
it.
the reason again.
Tell us why.
Explain it
Oh,
to him.
Well, the pastor's hangover, it's what every pastor has on Monday because the weekend is, we talked about it. It's a big emotional, all that spiritual battle.
True.
So Monday morning you wake up, you're dead,
tired.
you're tired, and you're going, why did I say that? I wish I would have said that. I wish I would have explained
true.
something different.
Yeah,
So,
and these are going to really serve a lot of weeks as an extension of what we talked about on the weekend.
Yes. Yeah.
So that, hey, that kind of hangover feeling, should I have said this? Could I have said more? What else could I dive into? This is going to be a deeper dive into those topics. So this week, we're going to be talking about Firm Foundation, the incredible message by Tony Evans.
Yeah.
It is called Grit. If you're going to look it up, we definitely
good
suggest
message.
you watch it. Alongside this podcast, Grit by Tony Evans. You can find it on our YouTube or Spotify.
Yeah, I went to the incredible message, and I left after first service, went to the Buccaneer game, went from grit and determination and excitement to a bad hangover. It was foundations weren't there, the basics weren't there. We lost the game, but that's my hangover. But we'll go on to things that God cares about. I don't think God cares about football.
I think
He does.
I feel like God cares about football.
That's a
Why are
whole
you
nother
shaking? Why are you
conversation.
shaking your
I
head?
don't know.
Here, I have a question. Since
Okay.
we're in the hangover
Okay.
and we're talking about things we wish we had said or didn't say.
Yeah.
Craig, can you think of one thing you said in a message that you go, "Ooh, I wish I didn't say that"?
Yeah. My son one time, I think it's the only time he's commented on my message. He's about 10 years old. It was the beginning of the year, and I said, "Hey, we all need to have a fresh start." But I didn't say start. I said fresh fart. And that's the only thing he remembered. Dad, that was really funny. So that was not a good. That wasn't a good start to a new year.
No, that wasn't. No.
So
All right. What about you guys?
You got-
Hal and Daryl, anything you've said?
I'm just happy so much of my first years of ministry were not recorded. I know I said some stuff in youth ministry. I'm just trying to think of what I don't know.
that's right. You don't have to force something. It may come to you later.
Yeah.
Daryl, I know you've had a lot of bloopers.
Yeah,
probably.
not preaching, but leading worship.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I've had some real bloopers. I had one where I was yelling at the audience.
That'll encourage me.
Oh yeah, it was horrible because I had such a good time in worship in my own personal time. I thought they should be having the same experience,
And
so they weren't until I was upset. So I was like, "What are you guys doing? Like, don't you love Jesus?
Yeah.
Like, what's wrong with
guilt
you?"
them into it.
Powerful.
powerful.
It went horrible, and
That didn't work?
It didn't work at all.
Wow.
And my mentor at the time pulled me aside after service and was like, "What was that?"
That is
I was like, "I'm
hysterical.
passionate."
So
And now that does remind me of one. I was in youth ministry and I was mad because I kept telling jokes and none of the kids laughed. And I literally
Same today, yeah.
I literally got mad. And I was like, what is wrong with you guys? This is funny. And then they started laughing because I got mad.
There you go.
But
There you
it was
go.
not a good
that is
situation.
hysterical.
The early days.
Yeah.
So we are going to chat about Firm Foundation
Yeah.
and building your house on stone, building your house on sand.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear your guys just
Well, I can't
thoughts
think
on
of a
that.
better time to do it. I mean, with all the instability in our world and people's personal lives, I mean, really the breakdown of the family unit, which Tony referred to, that that the storms are coming. I love the verse in Matthew 7, when the storms come.
Yeah.
And so we know they're coming. It's like, what are you building your house on? The sand or the rock. Sand is something very temporary. And I think a lot of times people don't mean to, but they really are. Even Christians are building their life on temporary things that aren't going to matter when the storms come, And I'll say this as kind as a know-how. I love sports, and I love kids' sports. My kids played sports, but nowadays, I mean, I'm talking about building. I mean, the commitment it takes for for your kid to be in some kind of league or soccer, football, and now it's taken over weekends, and here they are focusing on this, and I love it. I love sports, but when you start missing 8, 10, 12, 15 weeks of community and church and the Word, you're talking about building a house on a rock, and then you wonder why my kid doesn't want to come to youth group because they got so out of it. I know I'm getting off a little bit, but in a way, foundations start with repetition. It starts with good habits, whether it's in your personal walk, reading the Word on a daily basis. Do not forsake the gathering of yourselves together, being in a group. You do those things consistently. That's all part of that foundation, the relationships we need. The Bible says bad company ruins good morals. Well, good company then must do something really good for you too. So some of it starts the simple things.
You're right. I mean, I remember in youth ministry not seeing kids for entire years because not just because of one sport, but their parents had them in every sport at the same time, and that was the thing. And it's tough to say. It's tough to say, hey, you should back off this, but at the same time, you always have to look to the future of what is this? What's the best possible outcome of this? What is it that we're building on here? Because is the best possible outcome this is a college pro type deal, or is the best possible outcome they become good at a sport and it kind of ends, but then what happens after that? Right, the spiritual part's left behind. All the other sides. And so I heard somebody say, I don't want to pay somebody to father my child. And that's what tends to happen a lot of times when they're involved in so many sports. I'm not against sports at all. I grew up in sports. Absolutely. But I think there has to be a place where parents have wisdom to go, this is where we're going to draw the line because this needs to be important.
I played sports all through high school, played basketball, played football 1 year. Wasn't that great. Well, I gave up. I didn't have the grit. I got hit really good one time, and I was like, this is not my sport.
There you go.
Played basketball, but ran track. I was in choir, whole bunch of stuff. But my father was very persistent in the fact that church comes first. And so we told our coaches, hey, Daryl's going to be late because he was at church, or Daryl's not coming because he was at church. And our coaches were like, okay. There was never a complaint. I was late to games sometimes because we had Bible study, and they dealt with it. And I was still a star athlete, So I think when you put God first and you make that a responsibility that, hey, God is first. This is just me allowing you to play sports. It's good, may be good for you. But the foundation is Christ first. And so I thank God for parents that made sure, hey, let's keep this first always. And so, and it's been always all my life. And I did the same thing for our children as well. And they played sports. And I got a daughter right now who's playing volleyball everywhere. But they know, hey, when we got church, we got church.
That's right.
Yeah, I love that we went in this direction. That was one of the first questions that we got was, how do I do this? How do I build my life on that firm foundation in the chaos, in the busyness of every day?
I think there's so many distractions. It's kind of like you got this jar with the rocks. You got to put the big rocks in first, because if you let all the little rocks, I'm not saying they're not important, the big rock, and the big rocks are, your personal time with the God, your personal reading time, relationship, community, your church. Those are the big rocks, and that's putting Him first, and that's how you begin to build that foundation.
I think sometimes the question is like, how do I build on a firm foundation? Is where are you starting from?
Right.
And so when you asked the question, it made me remember when my wife and I were building our home. It was the first thing they did is they excavate. They clear the ground. They get it prepared to set the foundation. And I think that's a part we don't do. We don't get all the stuff out of the way. We want to build the foundation on top of the stuff we're already doing.
The rubble. That's not going to work.
It's like, no, you got to clear the ground first. So that means you have to be intentional about moving things out of the way that are not priorities. Get them out of the way, move them to the side, throw them away, and then begin to build the foundation.
And it just goes back to this too. And I know, Pastor Craig, this is big. I know we've talked about this a lot. I've got a lot of emails lately on how do I know the Bible's true. And the thing is, if you don't come to the point where you know the Bible's true, you won't study it. If you don't study it, you don't have a foundation. Like you have to have something that's unmoving, unchanging. And that's the hard part in society today, because people believe, oh, I can just change truths at any moment. Well, if you don't have something that's stable, that stays the same, then you're not going to be able to have a firm foundation. And so if you don't know God's word, and look, coming on the weekend's great. even going to a small group is awesome. But if you don't spend some time getting to know God's word, and there's so many ways of doing that, when it comes up to the hard things in life, it's not going to be there. You're not going to have the wisdom to make the right decision in that moment.
Well, you think about firm foundation, you think about human opinion or culture. Human opinion and culture change every 10 years.
Yes,
you go back, they had a different stance on a lot of controversial subjects 40 years ago. They changed 30 years, 20. They're changing. God's never changed. That's the firm foundation. Whether you're uncomfortable with the truth or not, it's not convenient many times, especially based on what culture or human opinion is. It is the truth, and you have to start there and trust it. And there's a lot of times, to be honest with you, that I have to trust the truth even if I don't understand it.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the faith part. Like, God's a good God. He's way smarter than me. His ways are higher than my ways. His thoughts are higher than my thoughts. Quit trying to be God and just admit the things you don't understand, but still trust it. It's like a father and a child relationship.
Yeah.
They don't understand. They tell you, you know, you can tell them, but they don't understand all, but they need to trust and obey because you're a good father.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much stuff we trust that we don't understand,
Yeah.
except when it comes to the Bible, except when it comes to faith. It's like, I don't know about that. You don't understand how your car works.
Right.
But you trust that it'll
Right.
get you where you need to be. I still don't know how a microwave works. I just know it heats up the food from the middle out. I don't know why that makes any sense at all. But I still put my food in the microwave. And so we trust all these things that we don't understand completely. But then we say, well, in order for me to trust God, I need to understand it completely. There's an element of faith that we have to have. And God has been consistent enough to that we can honor his word and believe what he's going to say.
And, you know, go back to the archives. Really, we could spend a lot of time on that, but we have archives of why we can trust the Bible, why we can believe the Bible, why the Bible is inspired by God. There's a lot of confirmation through science and through prophecy. So go back to some of those series because you have to start there, right, Al?
Yeah, just this past year, you did one on why I can trust the Bible. Then I did one a year ago in our Truth Over Trend series. So yeah, you do. And one of the things with God, it's interesting how we can go, but God, have you seen it from this perspective? Yet we understand, like when an adult is talking to a child, like of course the adult knows what's going on, but I don't know if we fully like fathom how much older God is than us. Like how much more he's seen. Like we said, his ways are above our ways, but it's hard for us to see ourselves as children, as like not being able to see the full picture, because what we see we think is important. And because but we don't see all of it. It's not possible to see all of it, but we don't like putting ourselves in that position of I may not know something. And so I rather go off of what I know and what I see than assume that God sees something that I don't. But but it's going back to God's word and seeing how he has worked through, you know, the years, the thousands of years there to see where he is today, to understand him a little bit more. And I always ask the question, guys, I'm like, what's the worst that has happened when people truly follow after God? Like not become religious. Right. When they truly follow after God, please tell me the bad consequences of that. Better relationships? Like what is it that goes badly there? Yeah. Like even the things that people don't like to talk about. Like what's the worst thing that happens if you abstain from sex before marriage? That's about it. Yeah. Like just tell me what the worst thing is. And it's just kind of funny when you think through those things. It's not that we don't think it's a better way. It's just not the fun way. Or it's not the way that we want to do it.
Well, if you really look at the outcome, I mean, all of us have been pastoring for years. It breaks my heart when I see people go through something. And then think what Dr. Tony Evans said, the storm reveals the foundation. They go through something, you see them falling apart. It breaks your heart. And you go, man, I guess they weren't founded on the word. You know, and that, I just know there's always going to be a better outcome. Getting that foundation as you know Jesus tells us to.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I loved the way Dr. Evans talked about it. He called the season of life, he said there's going to be hurricane season. It's not the if, it's the when. I'd love to hear you guys talk about, you know, the hurricane season, like maybe what that looks like in your life, or what do we do when it looks like the whole world is crumbling and we're like crying out to God, how could this happen? What can people do, you know?
You're looking at me, and all I can think about is when I moved here, my wife had been here a week. They got here and it's hurricane season. We'd never been through a hurricane.
So we're talking about actual
This is
hurricane
real-
season in Tampa now.
Yeah,
so
we're
everybody knows.
in Tampa.
And you
Not
didn't
the
realize yet
metaphorical
that the
one.
weather reporters work with Home Depot?
I didn't know that.
And Publix.
And so I don't know
Yes.
anything about hurricane season at all. And I'm moving here, and my wife gets here the first week, so the move wasn't great. And she gets here, and it's a hurricane. I think it's Hurricane Ian or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And we don't know what to do. We have no idea how to prepare for what's going on.
Oh my gosh.
And so I go to Home Depot thinking, okay, I'm going to go to Home Depot. I'm going to get some wood. And I go there to get some wood. There's no wood. Like all the shelves are bare. And so I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to do that. So, okay, we'll go to Walmart. I'm going to get water. There's no water. And so I'm driving around. My wife is driving around. My wife, she's gotten a generator. She's got 2 generators.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, wow.
Because we don't know what's going to happen. We spent 2 hours with the neighbors who convinced us everything is going to be okay. So we were like, okay, everything's going to be fine. And then I wake up the next morning, the day that Ian is supposed to come in, those neighbors are boarding up their house.
Yeah. Like, they just told us everything is
Yeah,
okay.
they haven't boarded their house in 40 years. And then that morning, they're boarding up their house.
Gosh.
And so I'm leaving to go to the gas station because I at least want to have gas in the car in case we got to go
course.
somewhere. And I'm pulling out of my driveway, and I'm like, "Hey, Larry," and he's like, "Yeah, my wife told me to board the house up." I was like, "You're kidding me!" And so I don't know what to do. So I go to the gas station, I come back home, and my wife goes, "You wouldn't believe what I just saw," because I didn't have the guts to tell her. She's like, "Larry's boarding up his house." I was like, "Yeah." She says, "What are we going to do?" I said, "We're going to sit here and just pray and believe that this is where God wants us to be, and this is going to be fine." We don't know anything else, and we're getting texts and emails from friends in other parts of the country, and they're like, "Are you okay? Is everything all right?" It's like, "Yeah," and our faith was in this is where God told us to be. You're going to be okay, and God just telling me you're going to. Now my house, the hurricane was in the house. It wasn't outside. There was wind and there was rain, but there was more anxiety happening in the house than anything. But we did what we knew to do. We prayed. We worshiped together. We sat together and we said, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. But God is going to take care of us. And that's in those times where there's chaos happening, the best thing that you can lean on is, what did God say? He says, I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to be with you in the middle of this. I love that Dr. Evans used the story of Jesus being on the boat with the disciples. And he says, hey, we're going to go to the other side. But then there's this storm. Yet Jesus is sleeping on a pillow. And the best thing they could have done, I love that he said, is got a pillow too. And because the hurricane is going to happen, I never told you that it was going to be comfortable. I told you that we'd make it.
And he was in the boat with them.
And he's in the boat.
He's always in the boat with us, no matter what the storm is. And that's, to me, when you say, what do you do in it? How do you prepare? I mean, don't panic, first of all.
Yeah.
I tell you, when you panic and make bad decisions in the midst of a hurricane in your life, they're bad decisions. You know, I always tell people, don't make decisions on emotional highs or lows.
Right.
You know, but when you're in a storm, the worst thing you can do is panic. You just got to buckle down and believe, hey, God's going to be with me in the storm of relationship, the storm of finances, but don't panic. I've seen people panic in these instances, and you can't panic. You just got to be still, know that He's God, and really trust and believe. It seems so basic, but man.
Yeah, and I would say this, you need some people around you to help you in that, because if we sit alone for too long in the storm, we start to imagine, we start to believe a lot of things that aren't real, because especially when the storm's a longer one, you're going to need some people to come alongside you and go, hey, you got this. There is something on the other side. You may not see it, but we see what God is doing. And I think that's the hard part. And I would say in this, like the hard part in it is when you make emotional decisions on the low, like you were talking about, Pastor Craig, you tend to extend the storm without realizing it. We make the bad decision to get a momentary glimpse of happiness or momentary glimpse of an end, but it ends up just extending it as we continue to learn whatever it is that we need to learn as we're walking through it. And so it can be tough. And now we're also not saying that if Category 5 hurricane comes that you should just sit in your house and pray. But
No, do not recommend.
but I didn't board up my house either. But I grew up in South Florida, and I'm like, this is going to be fine. But all of our
if you got a
neighbors
good
left.
foundation. I mean, back to the hurricane in Florida. Most of the damage in Florida is not the wind; it's flooding. Most houses are built on a pretty good foundation, unless you live in a mobile home,
Right.
things like that. So, back to trusting the foundation. We can trust our foundation in Christ, that He's got us. He's our Heavenly Father. He knows about the birds of the air and the lilies of the field, and He's going to take care of us. And man, we got to get back to a real basic trust in our Heavenly Father in the midst of, the Psalms, 23.
Yeah.
In the valley, I will be with you. Thou art with me. And, David was a shepherd, but he is with us in the valleys.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think one of the most powerful things that happened over the weekend, and I know many of you weren't at Man Event, was but Tony Dungy shared his story, and he just kind of went through all the highs in his life, and you could go, oh wow, that's amazing!
life.
Like what a blessed life. And then he showed all the lows in life, and then kind of showed them together. And I think it was just a perfect depiction of what life looks like. And I think sometimes we just assume people aren't going through the storms.
Yeah.
That have really good foundations sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is you want to get near some people that love God, that have walked through some things that can help you understand what it looks like on the other side and what it looks like to go through it.
Yeah.
Because what we tend to do is we tend to make the storm worse, not understanding that it's possible to get through it. Yeah. And Tony's story, just the timeline was so powerful. Just seeing the highs, the lows, but God still bringing him through it at every moment. And how God's used him.
I think the Old Testament gives us the greatest storm that ever hit a person was Job. We don't like reading it. It was tough, man. Even reading it, the loss of everything from children to his health to his finances. But then, I think around Job 42, God tells Job, brace yourself like a man. And he says, I'm going to tell you, because he was asking why, and I think we do ask why, and it's hard. But he never gives him an answer. He just says, here's who I am.
Yeah.
And I think that's the hardest thing in the midst of a storm, because there's loss. We all have had loss. I won't know some of that till I get to heaven. But I got to trust God's still going to work things for good. And that's what he did do in Job's life. But it's hard in the middle of the storm. That's why you need people, you need community, you need the word, you need to be encouraged in the church.
Yes.
Yeah.
As I heard a pastor talk about Job's life, and he said, what's interesting is Satan took so much away from him, but he figured the worst thing he could do was leave his wife.
Well, her only advice to him was curse God and die. Curse God and die. Yeah.
Which has got to be hard, because when you love somebody and you see them going through, I could understand his wife's position.
The wife. Okay.
I can understand her going, come on, man. Like, this is going really bad for you. Yeah. But foundation matters. I mean, but you said you got to remember, what did God say? And God never answers him, but God spends 7 chapters telling Job who he is.
Yeah, the creator of all this.
It's like 7 chapters saying, here's who I am. And so I think it further solidifies Job's foundation to be reminded, even though he had questions, God isn't answering his question like, God, why are you doing this to me? And God goes, where were you? Where were you when I did all this? I'm this, and this. So at the end of that, Job is like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because and without that, I think Tony Evans said, we want what did he say? We want skyscraper lives on chicken coop foundation.
Yeah.
And so we're expecting God to do all these great things, or our lives to look a certain way, but the foundation isn't sure. Yeah. If you don't know who God is, and if he's not that in your life, then you'll never have a skyscraper life. You'll never be able to endure the storm, because he's not all of those things to you. And so I love that God reminds us to remind ourselves, this is who God is. Yeah. And so, because we're really good at forgetting.
Yeah. I think one of the best things Job said in the midst of his storm, or after the storm, was, will I not bless God in hard times? It's easy to bless God in good times. And I think the foundation will help you go, wait a minute, this isn't the end. Right. We always feel like it's the end. It's over. It's never going to work out, the finances, the relationship. But no, my foundation's in him, and I'm going to believe that God's going to still be God and deliver me through this storm.
Yeah.
That's awesome. just a tougher question. You know, when I think about the boat and I think about the story of Mark and I think about the pillow, right? The pastor, you know, Tony Evans really said he had a pillow. Like he knew he didn't just fall asleep. Like he was taking a nap and he had planned to. You tuck that pillow in, you're feeling good, you're getting cozy. So when I think about what those that were on the boat had this false anxiety. Like they were going to get there whether they were anxious or they were napping. They were going to get to the same place. Yeah. So can we just talk about that false anxiety that people might create in their own lives? And how do we mediate that? I mean, I just think that's a big buzzword. A lot of people are talking about it, and I think, you know, there is some reality to what people are going through, absolutely. But some of it is self-induced, where I could be grabbing a pillow in a lot of situations. So
anxiety is worry, and worry is when you focus on the wrong thing. And I've never seen worry add one moment to a person's life like Jesus said. So back to your point, they forgot what Jesus said. We're going to go to the other side. We forget the promise. We forget who God is. And I think, you know, that when you focus on the wrong thing, you're going to have high anxiety. When you start focusing on the right thing, you may still have the same circumstances, the wind and the waves, but you're in a different place. There can be a peace on the inside, even though there's chaos on the outside. And I'm not saying that's like that every time for me, but I remember moments where I just had to not panic. Go, wait a minute, this is really trying to freak me out, but I'm going to focus on who he is. And it really has helped get me through some things, you know, as a church in 30 years and some of the stuff that we've had to work through. I had to go, wait a minute, God, you're in charge. I'm doing the best I can to follow you. I'm not going to panic. I'm not going to focus on the negative or what we see. Like the 10 spies came back. What were they focused on? The giants and land we can't conquer. 2 came back and go, we can do this. It's what are you focusing on is a huge part of, you know, worry or peace.
That's it.
Yeah. I think that's why I think in the middle of some of these things, one of the best things you can do is a technology fast. Because I think one of the biggest things that brings in anxiety into our lives is not just our own lives, but everybody else's life. There's the FOMO of missing out. There's the idea of everybody else my age is doing this. Everybody else's life is better. And we have not just the anxiety of our own lives, we have the anxiety of everybody else's life in our life. And so it's crazy when you look at the stats and all of that. And like I've said this before, nobody's ever taken a fast from social media and said, you know what? I felt worse after that. Everyone always says the same thing. I felt better after that. Yet then we go back into it. And so I think in today's world, one of the reasons anxiety is so high is because it's like you said, we're focusing on anything but Jesus, and we have way more things to focus on than we've ever had before.
Can I
way more things.
Well, the one of the most ridiculous one. I'm sorry, I'm going to offend a lot of people, but can we offend people on this podcast?
Yes,
yeah,
sure.
We named it the Pastor's Hangover.
We've created something. It's called climate anxiety. So I'm worried so much about the climate. And listen, I'm all for environmental measures, but it's gotten so overboard, focusing on things that possibly maybe could happen 80, 100 years from now. And I have a whole different view on climate than anyway. This whole climate anxiety is one of those fake anxieties.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, when you got a little girl standing up there 3 years ago crying that, you know, you're killing the world and we're going to be over in 10, 15 years, the world's done. I'm sorry. A lot of bad information.
Yeah. Well, that, and if we really, this is a whole bunch to get into, but me, myself, I don't have the ability to do anything about it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the greatest anxiety is when we worry about things that we literally don't have the ability to control.
Right. Yeah.
It's like the same thing. We're going to have an election coming up in a little bit. Like my vote matters. Don't get me wrong. But I have no ability to control any of it.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't have the ability to control any of those things. And so there's going to be a ton of anxiety coming out, and you're going to see people, no matter which way the vote goes, you're going to see people's lives that feel like they're ruined.
Yeah.
And you're going, but you didn't have control over that.
Right.
So,
and I don't see when the Bible says governor is my savior anyway. I mean, it's just, there's so many things that we worry about that I just go, wow.
This is what the people want to hear. This is the good stuff right here.
My daughter, who sometimes struggle with anxiety, I'm talking to her the other day, and she had to make a decision, and she was like, "Dad, I'm anxious over this, and I don't know what to do." And I said, "What can you do about it?" I said, "If you can do something about it, then why are you anxious? If you can control it, then just do it. But your issue is you want to control the outcome in areas that you can't control the outcome. And that's what you're anxious about, is that you want to see the end. You don't get to see the end. God doesn't promise that we get to see the end. You get to make the decision that you get to make right now, and make that decision. And because if you can do something about it, there's no reason for you to be anxious. If you can't do anything about it, there's no reason for you to be anxious. So live in what God has given you the ability to do and keep on moving. And that's it. And my father used to say this: if you're going to pray, don't worry. But if you're going to worry, don't pray. So pick a thing. But you don't get to do both. So if you're praying, you're saying, God, I'm giving it over to you, and whatever the outcome is, that's what it is, and I'm gonna let you have it. So, anxiety is a killer, and the Bible gives us the cue. You already said it. Anxiety gives us the cues of what to do, and God knows we're going to be anxious. He knows it's Philippians. When he says don't be anxious
for nothing, he said it's hard.
Yeah, and then when you are anxious, here's what you do.
Yeah,
think on these things.
That's right.
What's true, what's just, what's of good report, what's praiseworthy. Here's what you do, because that's the only thing that's going to get you out of this anxiety-ridden circle that you're in anyway. And so
change your thinking, change your focus.
Exactly. Yeah. And so as long as we do that and commit to doing that, and as I told my daughter, I said, you have to practice peace.
That's good.
You got to practice saying good things, because we're really good at rehearsing the bad stuff.
Yeah.
That's why you got to turn the TikTok off. That's why you got to turn because we're just rehearsing it over and over and over. There's a trend. There's a trend on TikTok right now, which is the trend is leaving your phone at home while you go for a walk. And people are doing
Has
it like
that ever happened before?
Like they just made it up.
Wow, that is amazing. I'm gonna write that one down.
That's the trend. It's like, hey, I just came back from a walk, and it was
Without my phone.
Without my phone, it
like
was
naked.
Amazing. Yes,
Like no clothes on.
I was like, and people are literally on TikTok talking about how
What an accomplishment.
Yes, they feel more refreshed, and they feel they can hear more, and they feel more at peace and all that stuff because they didn't have their phone. I'm like, oh, no kidding.
Right.
Go for a walk without your phone.
Right.
So now we made fun of climate anxiety and people holding on their phones.
What's crazy, I want to go, guys, my parents didn't know where I was for at least 5 to 6 hours a day.
Yeah.
There was no phone on me. Like, there was just, at some point, my dad would yell at the front, I'd have to find a way to get back home. But,
Exactly.
It's funny. I heard a pastor say this. I thought it was so good. He goes, if after you're praying you don't feel better, you're not praying, you're just complaining. Because you're not unloading it. You're just mad at God about it. And that's the thing. We gotta actually realize how big our God is and what he can do. And once you understand that, then you can unload and give him what's on your shoulders that you were never meant to carry. But if you just see God as somebody that doesn't care or isn't that big of a
Not personal or
then you're just going to complain to him and go, well, I prayed. No, that's not praying. That's just complaining.
Wow. We kind of moved from that to foundations and worry, but that's good because your foundations is about focus.
Yeah,
it
about
is.
knowing who you are, and we hope this helped you today.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for joining us of another episode of the Pastor's Hangover. We will see you guys next week.
All right.